Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the next video in my Big Ten season in review series. Today's going to be a little bit different because it's my main team, Michigan. But before we get into the video itself, I am going to go ahead and ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did, and be sure to turn on that notification bell because I am going to be dropping more Michigan content in the future. And speaking of that Michigan content, I'm going to have at least 2 Michigan-centric videos coming very, very soon. And that's either going to be probably Mikey Keene, a film breakdown and analysis of him, or a film breakdown of Bryce Underwood's high school film and analysis there to try and figure out what he is good at and what we could potentially see out of him and Mikey Keene. I'm pretty much already leaning towards just starting Bryce Underwood with the little bit that I've looked at for Mikey Keene right now. But Mikey Keene, I think, does raise the floor of the Michigan quarterback room significantly. It would not surprise me if he started for, honestly, the majority of this season, because it seems like that Michigan is just going to be conservative in that manner. I think that's a very, very, very likely scenario, is that Mikey Keene is just the starter until he absolutely can't be anymore. And I don't know what point that would be, but that's going to be all you get for Mikey Keene and Bryce Underwood content in this video. I just wanted to let you know that that will be coming at some point, probably before the end of April. But what am I going to do in this video? Well, normally it would just kind of be one screen here where I'll spend 5 minutes talking about the season. However, there's a lot more to talk about with Michigan, given that I am a Michigan fan and kind of want to talk about them more. So today, instead of just doing that one screen and spending 5 minutes talking about shit, I'm going to go ahead and go game by game. And we're going to discuss the narrative of this season, because I think there's a lot of things in the euphoria of the final 3 games and the bye week before that a lot of Michigan fans have forgotten about, even though those problems didn't disappear and weren't really addressed in the transfer portal. So real quickly, Michigan was coming off of a national championship in 2023. I don't know if you remember that or not. It happened a very long time ago. I'm not sure if you remember that or not. So there was quite a bit of hype heading into this team. I think most people were very skeptical of the quarterback situation, and I was probably not as skeptical as I should have been of the quarterback situation. I was relatively sure that they would at least get mediocre quarterback play. That's not what happened, obviously. But at this point, we didn't know that. So I think most people were expecting a 9-3 regular season and kind of hoping that maybe with an upset of Ohio State at the end of the year, you get to 10-2 and backdoor your way into the playoffs. However, obviously that's not the way this season went, and it was pretty obvious even in game 1 against Fresno State that was not going to be the case, okay? Now, week 1, there was this moment where the broadcast for like 30 seconds of actual real time of that game, when Fresno State was driving down the field and they were only down by 13 points. Now, there was like 5 minutes left in the game, okay? So they would have had to have scored quickly, which they were on pace to do that. They had gotten a couple of big plays there, but they had to have scored quickly and either gotten an onside kick or a stop defensively in order to end up winning that game and pulling off what at the time would have been a top 10 Michigan team with a massive, massive, groundbreaking upset. So, and the broadcast was zoomed in on Sharon Moore. And he just stood there for like 30 seconds doing nothing, just staring into space. And I immediately texted my only friend in the whole world. And I said, oh boy, that's not a good look. That is a look of the lights are too bright. Okay? That is a look of I didn't know the big lights would be that bright. That's what that was. And that was kind of a harbinger of what was going to come of this season. And not just next week, or week game 2, okay? Not just that, but really the whole season. Because the biggest takeaway from Michigan versus Fresno State was the defense has some pretty glaring holes in it, and it's probably not going to be as good as we think it's going to be. And boy, oh boy, is the quarterback position a problem. So it was not all that surprising in week 2, even though preseason I was actually quite bullish on Michigan's chances to win this game. It was not at all surprising, looking at the way Texas looked week 1 and looking at the way Michigan looked week 1, that Michigan got ran out of their own home stadium against Texas. That game was an absolute disaster. Texas could have put up 50 if they wanted to, but they pretty much stopped playing football in the second half of this game. If you remember how that game actually went. I mean, it was 24-3 at halftime. However, Texas blew several opportunities to put up more points than that in the first quarter. They then put up 17 in the second quarter, and the game was over. It turned out that about halfway through the second quarter, the game was over. And they really could have done whatever they wanted to the rest of the game, and it didn't matter because Michigan was not going to win that game. And Texas wasn't even that good, really, this year, if we're being honest. That was not a very good football team. They got lucky and matched up against an overmatched but significantly better coached Arizona State team. And Arizona State pushed them a lot harder than I think a lot of people were expecting, and then they got their ass beat the next week. But I don't particularly believe that this was a good football team all that much. Well, I mean, they were a good football team, but they certainly weren't a great football team. And I think they got lucky to make the third round of the playoffs, the semifinals. I think they got extraordinarily lucky with their draws. They played number 12 Clemson, who shouldn't have been in the playoffs, and they played number 4 Arizona State, who was not the fourth best team in the college football playoffs. But that's enough about Texas. This game was an absolute travesty in just about every single way you can look at. In case you have forgotten, Evan Link at right tackle got absolutely fucking abused by a true freshman who is very, very good. Looks like he's going to be a future first round, top 20, top 10 pick, okay, for Texas. I don't remember his name, but he was number 11, I think. And he just got absolutely obliterated. Evan Link did. So that was an embarrassing performance by the offensive line in that game. And really the only time Michigan got any kind of offensive rhythm or consistency was when the Texas had pulled all of their defensive starters. And Michigan had that 8-play, 75-yard drive right at the end of the game, less than 2 minutes on the board, where Texas was playing their third-string defense. So, yeah, that was pretty much the only time Michigan was doing anything against Texas. So I am not of the belief that Texas was all that good, but they still obliterated Michigan. And that kind of was, again, a harbinger of what this season was going to be like, because that was not the last time that Michigan was going to get embarrassed this season. Now, as opposed to the first two games. I don't have a whole lot to say about Arkansas State. I thought Michigan handled business. I mean, they were up 28-3 with 6 minutes left in the game. Arkansas State gets a little drive, get on the board, and then they score again with 8 seconds left on a pass, just a chucking it into the end zone, see what happens type of play. All things considered, that game was fine, but again, it was very obvious and very evident that Michigan did not possess the ability to throw the ball, period. It wasn't like Texas, where they didn't have the ability to throw the ball downfield, okay? It wasn't like Notre Dame, where they didn't have the ability to throw the ball downfield, okay? And we've seen that in Michigan in years past, notably 2021 and 2022. We didn't really have the ability to push the ball down the field, okay, from the quarterback position. This season, they didn't have the ability to throw the ball, period. End of discussion. We didn't have the ability to throw the ball, okay? And at this point, I think we realized it wasn't going to be Davis Warren that was going to be able to throw the ball down the field. So I think after this game, everybody, including myself, was pretty happy when they announced that Alex Orji was going to start against USC. And the main reason, myself included, that a lot of people were very happy to see Alex Orji come into the game is because we were sold a bill of goods with Alex Orji that was just not true, flat out and straight up. We were told Alex Orji was a game-breaking athlete. That is not the case. Is he a good athlete? Sure. Okay. But he's not this freakish athlete that people have been saying that he is. And that was quite evident the first time he got onto the field for extended playing time. This game against USC was marred with coaching malpractice by USC. Okay, USC probably could have and should have put up 45 points on this Michigan defense. But Lincoln Riley, much like several other coaches would do in this game when they're matching up against Michigan, decided that they were going to run the ball at 2 first-round defensive tackles right up the middle that had multiple NFL caliber athletes backing them up and 2 NFL caliber linebackers behind them. This was something that you saw a whole lot the whole season. Michigan was just giving up chunk plays and yards in the passing game over and over and over and so consistently, and teams would still run the ball 60% of the time. So that game here against USC was the first game when I realized that was also becoming a trend in this season, where somehow, some way, opposing coaches watch the film of this Michigan defense with potential top 10 pick Mason Graham, potential top 10 pick Kenneth Grant standing there in the middle of that defense and said, hey, we're going to run at them. Nevertheless, even though it was coaching malpractice on Lincoln Riley's part, even though this team was quite evidently not a very good football team. I believe they were still ranked at that time. They were like 19th or 20th or 18th or somewhere in there. And even though Michigan was still ranked, it was very obvious to anybody with a pair of eyeballs that this was not a very high-quality football team. And USC was also not that great of a football team, as we would find out in the following weeks. But all that coaching malpractice by Lincoln Riley aside, they were still going to win the game. If they can tackle, they win that game. Period. End of discussion. But Lincoln Riley goes full-blown Marshawn Lynch, runs us inside the 10. Michigan takes 4 plays to get into the end zone from there. But without the ability to throw the ball down the field, there was no reason that Michigan should have been able to go down and score that game. They got ridiculously lucky to win this game. Absurdly lucky, okay? I get USC, not good. Quite evident, not good. Horrible defense. Atrocious defense. It was quite obvious that the defense was very, very bad. And this was not great. Okay. So, yes, Michigan's 3-1. I believe they entered the next week as like the 11th team in the country, I think it was. They were not the 11th best team in the country. It was quite obvious the offensive line was subpar because USC's defensive line held their own against you. And if USC's defensive line is doing well against your offensive line ain't worth a damn. But at the end of the day, we exist in a black and white, right and wrong, win or lose world, and that was in fact a W. And that's going to kind of be a theme in this video here, where Michigan got pretty lucky to win a lot of the games that they won, and pretty lucky to not get destroyed in a lot of the games they lost. So, the next week, against a 2-2 Minnesota team that a lot of people did not think was all that good, it was actually pretty nice to be up 21-3 at halftime, and then come up and kick a field goal halfway through the third quarter to be able to really push the lead to 3 scores exactly. And Minnesota's not going to score 3 times on our defense. What is it? That's never going to happen. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, it did. And this was the game where a pattern that did not go away and was actually kind of evident before this, and certainly evident after this, of the Michigan defense absolutely collapsing in the fourth quarter. When the game was on the line, when the game mattered the most, the Michigan defense folded. So, yeah, that was pretty not great in terms of another trend. And once again, in this game, it was very obvious Alex Orji was not the guy either. And we were like, man, I guess Jack Tuttle is going to be the guy. I guess he's going to be who we're going to have to turn to next week when Alex Orji can't complete a forward pass. Because, fuck, we can't keep going with Alex Orji at this point. I mean, he went 10 for 18 for 88 yards, and that was the best game of his career. So we're in some deep trouble at the quarterback position. That's what this game was showing me. And also, oh boy, did we kind of get lucky at the end of this game. This is something I've talked about from both perspectives, but Minnesota probably should have gotten the ball there on that onside kick. And I know what you're going to say to me. Oh, they called the play. I don't care. Blah, 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 blah. He might have touched it early, too. I don't give a shit. Oh, they still had to get into field goal range and kick the field goal. I don't care. That was not a very honest way to lose the game. Okay? Because he was not offsides. It should not have been called. And they could have overturned it on review, saying that they touched the ball early. I don't know if they actually touched the ball early or not, because there's no real replay of that, of them breaking it down and giving us alternate angles of trying to look at where he touched the ball and where it was in the air and all of that, because the offsides penalty meant it didn't fucking matter. So I will never know, to be honest with you. We'll just never know. But I do believe that we got lucky in that instance. And just like we got lucky to beat USC, we kind of got lucky to beat Minnesota as well. So at this point, Michigan's sitting at 4-1. They're ranked well within the top 15. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, Alex Orji, maybe he can get better. Maybe we'll go to our third quarterback and he can actually throw the ball down the field. But maybe we'll get something out of the passing game and we can actually be the team we thought we were going to be. And then we ran into Washington. And yeah, this game was rough. This game was this one was bad. There's not a whole lot to talk about in this game other than, I'll give Michigan credit. They got down early. It really looked like Washington was going to blow us out of the water. Fought back. It's 10-14 halftime. You're fighting. You make the quarterback change. Jack Tuttle comes in, throws a touchdown pass to Colston Loveland. Okay, middle of the third quarter, 17-14. We've got this supposedly great defense. So let's go ahead here and shut it down. No, they don't score in the fourth quarter. If they do, it's a field goal, and maybe we can get field goal range, win the game. Nope. 13 points unanswered. Michigan got dominated physically, mentally, and spiritually in the fourth quarter of this game. And more importantly than that, they got severely outcoached, from the top down. Jed Fisk had a much, much better game plan than any other coach this year that played against Michigan, because he actually sat down and said, hey, I get that Michigan's pass rush is really good, but we're going to drop back and throw the ball 30 times. And holy shit, their offense was actually good and moving the ball consistently. Good Lord. Who would have thought a team without its top 10 pick at corner, or top 10 talent, he's not going to be a top 10 pick, or a top 10 talent at the cornerback position that was also missing most of its starters from the previous season and had struggled mightily in the first 5 games of the year. Who would have thought that they struggled to stop the pass? I still can't get over that. It still baffles me, looking back at this season, that more teams didn't just go full-blown air raid, because they would have dominated Michigan if they did that. I get it. Our pass rush is really good. But even if you give up 5 sacks, you're putting up 38 points. And Michigan ain't fucking getting to 38 points, period. They didn't have the quarterback play. They didn't have the offensive line play. They didn't have the talent really anywhere offensively to be able to put up that kind of points against anybody that was not Northwestern in that one game. So heading into the bye week, I think most people, including me, were pretty done with this team, because they very, very easily could have been 2-4 instead of 4-2. And we're talking about 1 or 2 plays here or there in USC and Minnesota that makes this a disastrous start to the season, where more people are calling for Sharon Moore's head than are saying he needs more time to figure shit out. Okay? And that was a major reason why I was not on the bandwagon of being like, no, he'll figure it out. I didn't believe that. Okay? Just the fact of the matter is, we didn't have any data points for Sharon Moore. And this is something I'm going to circle back to at the end of this video. But halfway through the year, 6 games in, what is a Sharon Moore Michigan football team? They're a team that can't throw the ball. They're a team that is significantly less tough than it was last year. A team that is effectively coasting on talent and talent alone, and is getting very lucky to win, and collapses in the fourth quarter with asinine, horrible coaching decisions and abysmal game plans to boot. That's what a Sharon Moore football team looks like 6 games into the season. Now, guess what? After this bye week, that starts to change. Now, the quarterback position didn't change at all in this game. Jack Tuttle makes his start of the season here. And, all things considered, 20 of 32 for 208 yards and an interception isn't that bad. It's not that bad. It's about 10 yards of completion. It's pretty good, actually. However, a lot of that was empty yards. Michigan gave up a lot of sacks in this game. And they also did quite a bit of pick up a first down, maybe pick up a second first down, 3 and out, punt the ball. So a lot of the stats and completions and yards in the run game even was pretty empty, because it didn't lead to points and it didn't lead to an ability to, hold on to the ball for long periods of time. However, all that considered offensively, the defense improved quite a bit, okay? You give up 2 field goals and 2 touchdowns with a 2-point conversion for 21 points against an Illinois offense that was quite good. They had some serious talent at the wide receiver position and an NFL quarterback in Luke Altmaier. That this was a quality football team. I was telling people the entire season, Illinois was much, much better than they were going to give them credit for. Illinois was a very, very good football team this past season, flat out and straight up a better team than Michigan. And defensively, this was the first time this season that Michigan looked competent from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And yes, they got beat because they didn't have the talent in the secondary. That was ultimately the downfall of this defense in every game except Ohio State and Alabama. But here, defensively, there was at least a light at the end of the tunnel. It looked like Wink Martindale used the bye week pretty effectively. He looked himself in the mirror and realized, hey, I don't have the talent in the secondary to be able to blitz on third down and play press man coverage without giving up a big play. I don't have the talent to do that. So we need to not be doing that. Now, ultimately, that is Wink Martindale's, blood, is to do that. So I expect him to do that this upcoming season as well. But that's not the point of the conversation today. The point is, this game was the first game where it looked like there might be something at the end of the tunnel. Unfortunately, after this game, a lot of people were just kind of done with the Michigan quarterback room, and Jack Tuttle pieced out. And we had to go back to Davis Warren. And going back to Davis Warren was not ideal. However, Michigan, at least from a coaching perspective, had improved enough to this point where I could say, looking back on it, probably should have had more confidence in their ability to fuck around and win this game. But I did predict Michigan State to win the game. I will say that, because I felt like Michigan State was turning a corner, not Michigan. It turns out I was wrong. Michigan was turning the corner, and Michigan State was not. First quarter of this game was rough. 99% of the second quarter was rough. They go ahead and score a season. The decision-making for Sharon Moore did not get better. It was pretty much the only aspect of this Michigan team that did not get better as the season went on, because he still made a ton of bullshit, horrible coaching decisions against every team other than Ohio State. He had a perfect game against Ohio State because they needed a perfect game to win, and they won the game. But yes, even against Alabama, he had some bad play calls and some bad decision-making in that game. And we'll get into that when we get to Alabama at the end of this video. However, for this game, going for two, it wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't a good idea either. Because all that means is that you've got to go for two again later. And if you miss that one, that's even worse. Because then the other team can go for two and make it so you have to kick a field goal to tie, not win. Generally speaking, I'm not a fan of going for two unless it's to win a game at the end of the game. But, it's whatever. I guess people can have different philosophies even though they're wrong. But they then get lucky. Michigan State decides to try to air it out, to try to get into field goal range, I guess, with 30 seconds left in the game. You get a strip sack. You get a field goal to make it 9-7 at halftime, which is objectively hilarious because as bad as that decision to go for two was, the decision to try to throw the ball and push it downfield was way worse by Jonathan Smith. Horrible decision, especially with a turnover-prone quarterback in Adrian Childs, because he had a lot of turnovers. He didn't throw an interception in this game, but he had a lot of turnovers, man. A lot of turnovers. Anyway, third quarter, you end up getting the ball, go downfield. Alex Orji runs in for a touchdown, up 16-7. Michigan State gets a field goal, put it away on a trick play, go for two, get it, touchdown, 24-10. Michigan State gets a touchdown with 6 minutes left. Game's over. You win. You keep Paul Bunyan in Ann Arbor. You've beaten your rival, and you're a win, a sole singular win away from a bowl game, which at this point in the season, making a bowl game was the goal, because we weren't going 9-3 like I thought we might. Next game, 9th game of the season, was in fact the number one team in the country at that point in time, the Oregon Ducks. And this game, was about as good as it could have gone for Michigan, if I'm being honest with you, in this game. Because they looked competent. They looked like a well-coached football team that didn't have the talent to compete with a top-tier squad like Oregon. And that was a massive improvement from the earlier on in the season, where they were playing a hypothetically top-tier team in Texas and got absolutely ass-blasted. In fact, they spent a lot of the second half only down by 9 points. So hypothetically, could have gotten a break here or there, which they didn't, because why would they? But hypothetically, they had a little bit of a chance. Could have been something. It wasn't, and they didn't do anything. But still, back-to-back games without an interception from Davis Warren? Holy shit, what's going on? He actually looked somewhat competent. 13 to 23, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. What the fuck happened to him? And by the way, when you're throwing for 165 yards on 23 attempts, and the biggest thing you have to say about how good of a performance that was, that you didn't throw 3 interceptions, whoo! That's the state of the Michigan quarterback room in 2024 for you, though. Next week, 10th game of the season, getting into the double digits now, versus Indiana. And this was the game, looking back on it, it really, really should have been evident to me that Michigan had turned the corner, okay? Indiana was a tremendously good football team this past season. And because of automatic buys and bullshit like that, they got jobbed out of having a decent matchup for them in the first round, and they had to play Notre Dame, who went all the way to the national title game, and was just a horrible matchup for them and what they wanted to do. So they kind of got jobbed out of actually being a pretty decent playoff team, potentially winning the first round, but maybe if they got lucky with matchups like Penn State, could have gotten to the second round as well. So, I don't know. But Michigan could have won this game. Really. They could have won this game. Legitimately, they had a shot. They had opportunities to potentially win this game. And it was also evident in this game that the offensive line had improved significantly. It went from being an absolute devastatingly poor unit to just being normal levels of bad. And that's a tremendous improvement. And if you go back and watch this game, and I mean like actually watch it, not for entertainment value, study it, okay? There was a lot there. If Michigan had average quarterback play, which, no, Davis Warren was not average quarterback play. Period. End of discussion. I don't want to hear any of you people telling me Davis Warren was average quarterback play. He was not. He was a horrible quarterback, okay? However, he was the best option that Michigan had. Needless to say, he held the team back quite a bit, specifically in this game, with mediocre to average quarterback play here. Michigan probably wins this game. Now, it's probably something like 24-20, maybe. They probably could put up a couple of more points. Maybe they turned one of those field goals into a touchdown, specifically coming out in that middle of the third quarter, potentially. That could have been turned into a touchdown instead of a field goal, and then this looks like a different game, hypothetically, okay? Average quarterback play helped Michigan out a lot this year. I don't think it helped them a whole lot against Oregon. I don't think it would have helped them a whole lot against Illinois. I do think it would have helped them against Washington, and I do think it would have helped them against Indiana. So potentially with average quarterback play, that 9-3 that everybody was talking about probably could have happened. Potentially even 10-2, depending upon how much that mediocre quarterback play helped you out against Illinois. But as Michigan headed into the second bye week, they had kind of turned a corner. And yes, they lost the game, but Indiana was a top 10 team in the country. And they were one of the 10 best teams in college football this past season. And you went neck and neck with them. So that meant something, okay? And we're going to see another top 10 team in Ohio State and a top 15 team probably, well, maybe not top 15, but certainly top 25 team in Alabama that they beat. So towards the end of the year, you can make the argument Michigan was a top 20, maybe top 15 team in the country after they kind of figured some shit out, especially defensively. And then you came out of the bye week, and we'll talk about what happened during the bye week here in a second. But you came out of the bye week, and you fucking boat raced Northwestern team. Just a absolute slaughtering, especially coming out of halftime, which is something Michigan did a lot those last 3 seasons under Jim Harbaugh. They made the adjustment at halftime, figured some shit out, and then came out and boat raced teams in the second half. In fact, that was a theme for Michigan, was that they would kind of look a little bit underwhelming in the first half, usually. And then in the second half, they'd come out and just destroy people, okay? That seemed to have happened in this game here. Because you get a touchdown with 8 seconds left to make it 6-17 at halftime. And the game ends 6-50. You put up 33 points in the second half. And yeah, that's pretty good. This team looked like it turned the corner in this game. Although, again, looking back on it, I think they actually turned the corner against Illinois after the first bye week after Washington in the first bye week. That's when I think they actually turned the corner looking back on it. But I think a lot of people looked at this and said, uh-oh, they've got nothing to lose or play for next week. Potentially some historical parallels against Ohio State as well. But we'll talk about that later. But we actually have to talk about is the thing that lit the fan base on fire, which was, I believe, 3 days before this game, the number one player in the country, number one quarterback in the country, potentially a generational talent at that position, Bryce Underwood, flipped his commitment from LSU to Michigan. And that obviously was something that we've been talking about a whole lot. And I was not a believer that we were actually going to flip Bryce Underwood. But guess what? Money talks. And you give a kid $2.5 million AAV, he might listen, especially coming out of high school. That's a big deal. Legitimately, that's a lot of money. You're not going to turn it down. And let's also be very clear. He committed to Michigan because of the money. That doesn't mean he doesn't like Michigan. That doesn't mean he's not happy to be here. But he flipped his commitment from LSU to Michigan for the moolah. And let's not pretend that that isn't true. In fact, he literally said it. He did an interview during a Pistons game on the sideline. And when asked why he flipped his commitment from the Pistons sideline reporter, who I can't remember their name, but he asked them, he asked Bryce Underwood, and he was like, hey, why would you flip from LSU to the hometown school of Michigan? And he's just like, oh, man, it's just a blessing to be here, and it's really the money to be able to set my family up financially for, the future and everything. So, like, Bryce Underwood said it was the money. I don't know why we have to pretend it was anything else. Genuinely, I don't know why we have to pretend it was something else. That he always loved Michigan, that was always Michigan. No, it wasn't. It was LSU until we decided to cut him a check for $2.5 million. And LSU was not willing to get anywhere near that. In fact, it was reported after the fact from people that I would call reputable sources that LSU was reluctant to get over $1 million and ultimately settled around 1.2 in NIL guarantees for 1 year. And Michigan offered him 2.5 each season for 3 years, with a negotiation to be done for a 4th season potentially. Which, let's be real, he probably won't need a 4th season. But, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know. But probably not, if I had to guess. So, it looks like you get Bryce Underwood to commit, you boat race Northwestern, and then what happens in the last game of the regular season happens. And it looks like this whole goddamn program has swung back the other direction to being like, oh shit, we're vibing now. Who cares about 6-6 or 6-5 as we are right now, or 7-5 if they beat Ohio State? Who gives a fuck about any of that? We got the number one recruit in the country, and we're also turning it up on the recruiting trail in general. We got a second 5-star recruit in offensive tackle, and then later a third offensive lineman to be a 5-star recruit, although he's not a consensus 5-star. He's like 41 in the consensus, but he is a 5-star on 2 of the 4 recruiting sites. Anyway, that doesn't matter that much. All things considered, it looks like Michigan had turned the corner at this point, fully. And Michigan had turned the corner because they beat an Ohio State team that would boat race everybody in the college football playoffs except Notre Dame in the national championship game. This was an Ohio State team that won the national title, okay? This was a tremendous football team, maybe top to bottom the best roster in college football, and Michigan won the game. That was insane, okay? I actually stayed out late that night before because I wasn't particularly planning on watching the game anyway. So I had to get up at like 1:30 or 2, and then I looked at the score and it was halftime and it was 10-10, and I was like, I'm gonna go downstairs and cook food and then I'll check it again. And it was almost the end of the third quarter and it was still 10-10, and I was like, fuck it. Let's turn the TV on. Because if it's gonna happen, I want to watch it happen. So I had recorded the game because I was planning on watching it. I just didn't fall asleep until like 6 in the morning. So I was just like, I'm just going to record it and watch it later. If they win, they win. They lose, they lose. I'll just watch it because I'm going to talk about it, obviously. But man, this game was glorious. Not to watch. Oh my God, it was not an entertaining football game at all. It was a horrible product to watch. Okay, it was 13-10. It was not a good product to watch. But it was an awesome game if you're a Michigan fan. But if you're a bystander, as I like to call them, somebody that is watching the game because it's the game, or traditionally it's a big-time matchup between ranked opponents. Wasn't that case this year. But if you're watching it like that, not a great game to watch. And if you're an Ohio State fan, obviously not a very good game to watch. So, yeah, this one was weird because Ohio State also did the same thing that a lot of people did this year against Michigan. For whatever reason, they just decided to run the ball right up the middle 40 times for no reason, for legitimately no reason. They did that, and they weren't alone. USC did it. Indiana did it. Illinois did it. A lot of teams did it. Washington did it, but not really. They threw the ball a lot more than a lot of teams did. And like, it was just still baffles me. I've mentioned this several times at this point in the video. It baffles me that teams looked at the film of this Michigan defense and said, I think we can run the ball. Absolutely insane. Coaching malpractice for most of these teams, but especially USC. So the last 3 weeks of the regular season, Michigan got 2 5-star recruits to commit, one of which being a homegrown talent at the quarterback position that many, many, many people were calling a generational talent. And you boat raced Northwestern to get bowl eligible. So you get those extra practices, and Bryce Underwood, who's an early enrollee, gets to be around the team more and get to be around the coaching staff and gets to be, gets the playbook a little bit earlier, which is always good. So that was a big deal. And then you beat Ohio State. You win the game for the 4th year in a row. Absolutely insane. It's a great way to end the season. And guess what? We're not done. It keeps coming up maize and blue because they beat Alabama too. They started 2024 on January 1st by beating Alabama in the Rose Bowl. And you end 2024 on December 31st by beating Alabama in the Boca Raton Bowl for no real reason. That game was insane, by the way. This game was so weird because Jalen Milroe shit the bed so unbelievably bad. It was actually awesome. And a lot of the intangible things that before the early part of the season, a lot of people and media personalities, myself included, although I do not consider myself a media personality, I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. That's the whole fucking shtick of this channel. But there were a lot of people that said the same things that I said about intangibles and keeping the culture intact. And when it was raining in this game early on, when Michigan was forcing all the turnovers and kicking field goals, and they had that one insane pass and catch to Frederick Moore for a touchdown. When that shit was all happening, Michigan was like bouncing around on the sideline. They were singing in the rain like they were doing their best Gene Kelly impression. I could have said Debbie Reynolds, but that would have been, I don't know if that would have been weird or not. But Gene Kelly, certified OG legend Gene Kelly, they just needed a goddamn lamppost to jump up onto and swing around on. That's all they were missing. That's what they needed in that game. Because it was raining. They were all fucking jumping around and shit. It reminded me of I think it was 2021, when they went to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin did that shit in the third quarter where they play jump around, and then they jump around, and Michigan was jumping around on the sidelines having the time of their lives. And Wisconsin was like super tight and not at all into it at all on their sideline in that game. That's kind of like what this was. It looked like Alabama didn't want to be in that game. And it looked like Michigan wanted the opportunity. That's really what it looked like. It looked like Michigan wanted the opportunity to prove what we all always knew, and that was that the SEC fucking sucked last year. They were overrated. Alabama didn't deserve to be in the goddamn playoffs, and you are a loser and incorrect if you think they did. That's the reality of life. So I will forever be grateful to the 2024 Michigan Wolverines for proving that the SEC was overrated for this specific season. I don't know if they're going to be overrated or not next year. But man, they were so unbelievably overrated in 2024. Anyway, we're going to end this video here by giving this season a grade I think it deserves. And that's a B+. I think this was a good season. Okay, like a B would be an average season. I think this was a good season. Okay, even though they only went 7-5 in the regular season and then they won the bowl game, this was a good season because of the off the field stuff with the NIL and Bryce Underwood coming in and trajectory of the program, and they looked so much different at the end of the year as compared to the beginning of the year, and it really is night and day. If you watch this team against Alabama and you watch this team against Texas, it's night and day, man. Night and day. They look completely different football teams. So that's good. However, there are still things to be skeptical of heading forward. And that's kind of something that I wanted to bring up here, even though we got kind of ridiculously positive and we were vibing and having a good time towards the end of this video here. But there's still some stuff with Sharon Moore, with only one season as a data point, that you know are a little bit concerning here. Okay, the game management and the game planning are problems. Okay, now he's a young coach. I think he got better as the season goes on in both of those categories. Okay, but those are still question marks. They're not massive question marks. Okay, because they're known, but they are question marks heading forward. Also, is Wink Martindale going to revert back to his early season form where he's just going to blitz on every third down regardless if it's 3rd and 18 or 3rd and 3? Is that going to happen? How long is the adjustment period on offense with the new offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey? How is the quarterback situation going to play out? Is it going to be somebody with a relatively higher floor than what we had last year in Mikey Keene? Or is it going to be somebody with maybe the highest ceiling of any quarterback in the country in Bryce Underwood? I don't know. I would prefer if it was Bryce Underwood, but it is what it is, I guess. All things considered, looking back on this year, especially if Michigan does what I think they can this year, even if we keep mild expectations offensively and defensively, Michigan's staring down the barrel of 10-2, by the way. They have a very, very manageable schedule this next season here. I mean, they open up against New Mexico, should be an easy dub. At Oklahoma, little bit concerning. I think Oklahoma's not good, but they play defense down there, and they've got a quarterback who I think has the potential to be really good. Okay, so that game's a little bit concerning. Call that a 50-50 game. should beat Central Michigan. At Nebraska, tough game. Tough game. Don't know what Dylan Raiola looks like quite yet. Don't know what that receiving core looks like quite yet. Don't really know what the team as a whole looks like quite yet for Nebraska. But that's a team that could make a major jump forward. Should be able to handle Wisconsin. I think stylistically, I think Michigan should be able to handle USC. I think they should be able to handle Washington. I think they should be able to handle Michigan State and Purdue and Northwestern and Maryland. So I think realistically, 8-4 would maybe be like a worst case scenario with losses to Ohio State, Nebraska, maybe USC and Oklahoma. I think 9-3 is completely reasonable, and I think 10-2 is pretty realistic as well. I mean, listen, you could talk me into 12-0. You really could talk me into 12-0. I don't think that's a stretch. I don't think it's likely because 12-0 is almost never likely, but I don't think it'd be a stretch because I think the best two teams on paper in terms of known talent heading into the Big Ten next year are Oregon and Penn State. Okay, I would then probably put Illinois third. And Michigan plays zero of those teams in terms of known talent being good. Okay, you figure Ohio State's going to be good. You figure USC and Nebraska are going to improve. You figure Oklahoma's going to improve, but we don't know that. We don't know that. If that game was at home, I'd be pretty confident Michigan was going to win. But it's not. It's on the road. Same thing with Nebraska. Those are two tough draws to have on the road. Because your other road games at USC, I don't think that's that big of an advantage. At Michigan State, I don't think that's that big of an advantage. At Northwestern, at Maryland, I don't think that matters at all. So, yeah, that one's a little... This is a very, very manageable schedule next year. You could talk me into 10-2 pretty confidently. You could talk me into 11-1 or 12-0 too, if Bryce Underwood is the guy that a whole lot of people think he is. And if that is the case, 12-0 is on the table, legitimately. But that's just me. And what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. It's at this point I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.